They called him the Ghost Polisher, a harmless old man obsessed with a forgotten war machine. They were about to learn the jet had a name, and the man who cleaned it was a legend. The salt-laced fog of dawn was just beginning to surrender to the California sun when Leo Vance arrived. His 1980s pickup truck, its blue paint faded by decades of coastal air, rumbled to a stop in the visitor's lot of Naval Air Station Trident Point. At 78, Leo moved with a deliberate stiffness, but his purpose was unwavering. He bypassed the main visitor center and walked directly toward the gate guard, a young sailor who waved him through with a familiar nod. His destination stood sentinel at the base entrance, a McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II, mounted on a concrete pedestal, its twin engines silent, its wings angled as if perpetually ready to slice through the sky. For most, it was a relic, a static photo opportunity. For Leo, it was a ritual. Every morning, he would unpack a small canvas bag containing a collection of soft cloths, a bottle of specialized cleaner, and a small, foldable stool. Then, he would begin. He cleaned the Phantom not like a janitor, but like a curator tending to a priceless masterpiece. His hands, though wrinkled with age, moved with an intimate knowledge of the aircraft's soul. He'd trace the sharp line of the nose cone, wipe away the salty residue from the intakes, and polish the thick glass of the cockpit canopy until it reflected the vast Pacific sky. He knew every rivet, every seam, every faded stencil marking. He knew the thunderous roar of its engines coming to life on a carrier deck and the heavy silence that fell after a mission was done. "The Ghost Polisher is at it again," muttered Jake, a cocky 22-year-old aviation technician, as he and his friend Chris walked past on their way to the morning briefing. Jake was lean, with a perpetual smirk and the kind of swagger that came from being good at his job and knowing it. Chris, quieter and more observant, offered a hesitant chuckle. "Leave him be. What's the harm?" "The harm? He's making the rest of us look bad," Jake said, loud enough for Leo to potentially hear. "What's he even doing?" "It's a museum piece. Probably suffers from phantom fixation. Compulsive need to polish defunct military hardware." He laughed at his own joke. Chris watched Leo for a moment. The old man was on his stool, carefully cleaning the landing gear struts. There was a reverence in his posture, a tenderness in the way he wiped down the metal. It wasn't a chore, it was a tribute. "There's just something about him," Chris said, almost to himself. The teasing was a daily occurrence. The younger technicians and pilots saw Leo as a curious fixture, a harmless eccentric. They'd watch him from the windows of their barracks, coming up with increasingly elaborate backstories. One theory was that he was a disgraced mechanic trying to atone for a past mistake. Another was that he was just a lonely old man desperate for a connection to a world that had long since moved on. Leo, if he heard their jokes, never showed it. He remained in his bubble of quiet dedication. His face, a roadmap of wrinkles carved by sun and wind, was a mask of serene focus. He'd offer a polite, almost imperceptible nod to those who greeted him, but he never initiated conversation. When a brash young pilot once asked him directly, "Hey old-timer, why this plane?" Leo had paused, looked at the twin-tail fins emblazoned with a faded squadron marking, and replied in a soft, gravelly voice, "Someone has to remember." His answer only fueled their amusement. They didn't understand. They saw a man cleaning a machine. They couldn't see the ghosts he was polishing away, or the memories he was keeping alive in the gleaming skin of the Phantom. They had no idea they were mocking a giant, and that their ignorance was about to be shattered by the weight of a history they couldn't possibly imagine. The anonymous call came in on a Tuesday morning. The voice on the other end was a woman's, laced with the kind of civic-minded concern that often created administrative headaches. "I was visiting my son at NAS Trident Point," she explained to the duty officer, "and there's an elderly gentleman who is there every single day. He's all over the display aircraft by the front gate. No one seems to check his ID or supervise him. In this day and age, I just thought, you should look into it." The report landed on the desk of Chief Petty Officer Evans, the master-at-arms for the station. Evans was a formidable man, built like the anchor of a battleship, with a reputation for being firm but fair. He recognized the description of Leo immediately. The old man was a part of the base's scenery, as regular as the morning tide. He'd never caused a single problem. But a formal complaint was a formal complaint, and rules were rules, especially on a federal installation. The next morning, Evans approached the F-4 Phantom just as Leo was carefully wiping down the exhaust nozzles. The salty air was crisp, and the sound of gulls echoed from the nearby wharf. "Sir, I'm Chief Evans," he said, his voice respectful but official. "I need to have a word with you." Leo stopped his work and turned, his eyes calm but instantly alert. He gave a slow nod. "Of course, Chief. Is there a problem? Can I see some identification, please?" Leo meticulously wiped his hands on a clean cloth before reaching into his back pocket and pulling out a worn leather wallet. He produced a retired Navy ID card. Evans examined it. Leo Vance. Retired. The years of service listed were 34. "Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Vance," Evans said, handing the card back. "But a concern was raised about you interacting with the display. I have to ask you a few questions. It's just standard procedure." Leo's gaze drifted to the Phantom. "I understand. Why do you come here every day, sir? What is your particular interest in this aircraft?" Leo looked from the jet back to Evans, a universe of unspoken history in his eyes. "I just like to make sure she's looked after." The simple, honest answer caught Evans off guard. There was no hint of malice or instability, only a quiet sincerity. Plenty of veterans felt a pull to their old bases, a nostalgic connection to the machines they once operated. Still, procedure was procedure. "I appreciate that, Mr. Vance. Truly. But you need special authorization to perform maintenance or cleaning on display equipment. It's a liability issue. I'm going to have to ask you to stop until we can see about processing the proper clearance." A long silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant roar of a training jet taking off. Leo's shoulders seemed to slump, just slightly. His eyes fixed on the Phantom, and Evans saw a profound sadness wash over his face, the look of a man being told he could no longer visit an old, dear friend. "Of course," Leo finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand." He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He folded his cleaning cloths with practiced precision, placing each one back into his canvas bag. He packed away his bottle and stool, his movements slow and methodical. Before walking back to his truck, he turned one last time and placed a hand gently on the Phantom's fuselage, just below the cockpit. He stood there for a full 10 seconds, his head bowed. Evans felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. It wasn't the look of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the look of a separation, a forced goodbye. As Leo's old truck rumbled out of the parking lot, the F-4 Phantom seemed suddenly lonelier, a little duller under the morning sun. The investigation had officially begun, but for the young technicians who would later celebrate the old man's absence, they had no idea that what was about to be uncovered would turn every one of their jokes into a permanent source of shame. In the days that followed, a thin film of salt and dust began to settle on the F-4 Phantom. The morning sun no longer gleamed off a polished canopy. A few of the older base personnel quietly noted Leo's absence, a subtle disruption to the base's daily rhythm. But among the younger crowd, especially in Jake's circle, it was a quiet victory. Finally, Jake had declared at lunch, management dealt with the ghost polisher. Guess his haunting license expired. The official report, however, had started a slow burn in the administrative building. It landed on the desk of Captain Miller, the station's executive officer. Miller was a sharp, analytical man in his late 40s, an academy graduate who believed that history and tradition were the bedrock of military service. The name on the security report, Leo Vance, pricked at his memory. It was a common enough name, but there was something about it paired with a 34-year service record that felt significant. He couldn't place it, but the thread was there. He decided to pull on it. He called Chief Evans first. "Tell me about this man, Chief. What was your impression?" "A gentleman, Captain," Evans reported. "Quiet. Respectful. Seemed heartbroken to be told to stay away from the jet. Said he just wanted to look after her. There's more to it than just an old man with a hobby. I feel it in my gut." Miller trusted Evans's gut. He requested Leo Vance's full service record from the Naval Archives. While he waited, he took a walk to the base's own historical archive room, a climate-controlled space tucked away in the library basement. The room smelled of old paper and preservation chemicals. It was lined with filing cabinets and shelves of leather-bound logbooks. He started with the records for the F-4 Phantom on display. He found its original logbook, detailing its service history. It had been assigned to the Ghost Riders Squadron, VF-142, and had seen extensive action during the Vietnam War. He scanned the lists of pilots who had flown this specific airframe. And then he saw it. A series of entries from 1971. Mission type, Rescue Escort, Target Area, Quang Tri Province. Aircraft, F-4 Phantom II, Buno 155800, the very same one sitting outside. Pilot, Lt. Leo Vance. A chill ran down Miller's spine. It wasn't just a similar model. It was his plane. He spent the next 2 hours cross-referencing files. He pulled up the VF-142 squadron photos from that era. In a grainy, black-and-white photo celebrating the squadron's return from a deployment, he found him. A young Lieutenant Leo Vance, barely in his 30s, stood slightly off to the side. His face was leaner, his hair darker, but his eyes were the same, calm, alert, and carrying a weight that belied his age. The service record arrived via secure email just as Miller was staring at the photograph. He opened the file, and the full story spilled out in the stark, official language of military commendations. Leo Vance wasn't just a pilot. He was a legend. Between 1969 and 1973, he flew over 200 combat missions. He was a specialist in wild weasel missions, deliberately flying into the most heavily defended enemy territory to draw fire, allowing other aircraft to complete their objectives. He was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor, for a single mission in 1972 where he defended a downed reconnaissance pilot for over an hour against overwhelming odds until a rescue helicopter could extract him. His call sign, known throughout the 7th Fleet, was the Ghost. He had saved the lives of dozens of his fellow servicemen. The man the young technicians had mocked as a harmless eccentric was one of the most decorated naval aviators of his generation. And for years, he had been quietly, humbly, tending to his old warhorse, the silent partner in his heroism. Miller leaned back in his chair, the papers spread across his desk. He looked out his window toward the front gate, at the dusty, neglected F-4. Chief Evans was right. There was more to the story. So much more. And they, the institution he represented, had just shown one of its greatest heroes the door. The timing could not have been worse. Admiral Covington, a 4-star admiral and the commander of Naval Air Forces, was scheduled for a base visit the next day. Covington was a living icon, a former Top Gun instructor from the same era as Leo Vance. He was known for his fierce devotion to naval tradition and his even fiercer temper when he felt that tradition was disrespected. Captain Miller knew he had to get ahead of this. He intercepted the admiral shortly after his arrival, requesting a private word in his office. The office, with its panoramic view of the flight line and the distant, shimmering Pacific, felt like a pressure cooker. "Admiral," Miller began, his voice steady despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. "We have a situation here at Triton Point. An error in judgment has been made. A significant one." He laid out the entire story, from the anonymous complaint to his discovery in the archives. He handed the admiral the file containing Leo Vance's service record and the citation for his Navy Cross. Admiral Covington listened in silence, his sharp blue eyes scanning the pages. His expression, initially one of mild curiosity, hardened into granite. When he looked up from the file, his gaze was glacial. "Let me see if I have this straight, Captain," Covington said, his voice dangerously low. "Leo, the ghost, Vance, the man who practically wrote the book on flying the Phantom into hell and back, has been coming to this base every day to care for his old jet. And your security team, acting on a complaint from a tourist, treated him like a trespasser and ordered him off my naval installation. Sir, it was a procedural error. We are taking steps to—" "An error?" Covington cut him off, standing up and walking to the window. He stared out at the F-4 at the entrance. "That's not an error, Captain. That's a sacrilege." He turned back, his eyes blazing. He picked up a scale model of an F-4 Phantom from a bookshelf. "Men like Leo Vance are the reason we have the luxury of making procedural errors," he said, holding the model with a reverence that bordered on anger. "I was a lieutenant when he was flying out of Da Nang. We all knew the name Ghost. He was the guy you prayed was on your wing when things went sideways. He flew into fire so that boys younger than anyone in this room could be pulled out of a jungle and sent home to their mothers. He is the living, breathing embodiment of the honor we claim to uphold." He placed the model back on the shelf with a firm, deliberate click. "And we, the United States Navy, on this base, rewarded that legacy by treating him like an inconvenience. We allowed our youngest sailors to mock a man whose boots they are not worthy of polishing." The Admiral's voice dropped again, this time filled with cold fury. "This is unacceptable. This is a stain on this base and on my command." He locked eyes with Miller. "You will not take steps, Captain. You will fix this. Now." He pointed a finger toward the door. "Get his address. We are going there. And Captain, you will apologize on behalf of this entire naval station. And you will pray he accepts." An hour later, the Admiral's black staff car, with Captain Miller in the passenger seat, was pulling up to a small, weathered coastal bungalow with a view of the ocean. The weight of the legend they had disrespected felt heavier than any anchor, and the coming apology felt like navigating into a storm. The house was modest, its light blue paint peeling in places from the constant caress of the sea spray. A small, well-tended garden of succulents lined the walkway. Admiral Covington, in his crisp, starched white uniform, knocked on the door himself. Captain Miller stood a step behind, his own uniform feeling heavy and undeserved. The door opened, and there stood Leo Vance. He was in a simple collared shirt and slacks. The moment he saw the uniforms, decades of training kicked in. His posture straightened instinctively, his eyes locking on the 4 stars on the Admiral's collar. His expression shifted from surprise to stunned recognition. "Admiral Covington," he said, his voice raspy. "Leo," the Admiral said warmly, extending a hand. "It's been a long time. May we come in?" The 2 old aviators clasped hands, a silent acknowledgement of a shared, violent past. Leo led them into a living room that was as humble and tidy as the man himself. There were no plaques on the walls, no medals in display cases. The only hints of his past were a meticulously crafted model of the USS Constellation on the mantelpiece and an old nautical chart of the Gulf of Tonkin framed on the wall. "Leo," Admiral Covington began, getting straight to the point. "I am here, on behalf of the entire United States Navy, to offer you our deepest, most sincere apology." He then explained everything, how Miller had uncovered his identity, how they had learned the truth of his daily ritual, and the deep shame they all felt for how he had been treated. Leo listened in complete silence, his hands resting in his lap. He showed no anger, no bitterness, not even a hint of vindication. When the Admiral finished, a long silence filled the room, punctuated by the distant cry of a seagull. "They didn't know, Admiral," Leo said finally, his voice soft. "You can't blame young men for not knowing a history they've never been taught." "But you knew, Leo," Covington pressed gently. "You heard the jokes. You were ordered off the base. You never said a word. You never told a soul who you were. Why? Leo gave a faint, sad smile and turned to look out the window at the endless blue of the Pacific. What for? My time has passed. My story is written in the sky and on the sea, not on my chest. He paused, his gaze distant. Those medals are heavy, Admiral. For a long time, I carried them. Then I chose to put them down. If those boys saw me as just an old man who liked to clean a plane, then that's who I was to them. It was enough for me to just be near her. The sheer, unadorned humility of the man struck both officers into silence. Here was a hero of the highest order, a man who had faced down death, and he asked for nothing. He didn't want parades or recognition, he just wanted a quiet moment with his old friend. Covington, a man not easily moved, felt a lump form in his throat. He leaned forward. Leo, some things can't be put down. Some stories don't belong to just one person. They belong to all of us. They are the foundation we build on. He stood up. I want you to come with me. Back to the base. There are people there, young sailors and aviators, who need to see what real honor looks like. Not the kind that comes with stars on your collar, but the kind that comes from a lifetime of quiet service. Leo looked hesitant, uncomfortable with the idea of being put on display. Please, Leo, the Admiral said, his voice now a personal plea. Let us fix our mistake. Let us learn from it. Leo studied the Admiral's face, then the captain's. He saw not a demand, but a genuine, desperate need for redemption. He gave a slow, reluctant nod. All right, Admiral. I'll go. Word spread through NAS Triton Point like a shockwave. By the time the Admiral's car returned to the base, an unofficial assembly had already formed near the F-4 Phantom. Officers, enlisted personnel, technicians, and civilian staff stood in a silent, expectant crowd. Jake and Chris stood at the back, their faces pale. Every joke, every mocking comment now felt like a physical blow to the gut. Jake's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a look of profound, sickening regret. Admiral Covington escorted Leo toward the aircraft. As they approached, the crowd parted, a sea of uniforms creating a path of respect. The Admiral raised a hand for quiet. This, he announced, his voice booming across the tarmac, is retired Commander Leo Vance. Between 1969 and 1973, flying the F-4 Phantom, he earned the call sign, the Ghost. He flew over 200 combat missions and was awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism, saving countless American lives. A wave of awe, thick and palpable, swept through the crowd. For years, Covington continued, his voice resonating with emotion, Commander Vance has come here to care for this specific aircraft, his aircraft, without asking for a single thing in return. He did it out of love, and out of respect for the machine that carried him and for the memory of those who didn't come back. He is one of the greatest heroes this base, and this Navy, has ever known. He then turned and looked pointedly at the group of young technicians. Swallowing hard, Jake stepped forward, Chris right beside him. He walked until he stood directly in front of Leo, his eyes fixed on the ground. Commander Vance, he said, his voice tight with an emotion he couldn't contain. Sir, I want to apologize. Our actions, our words, they were inexcusable. Sir, we didn't just disrespect a veteran, we disrespected our own uniform. We saw the action, but we missed the honor. Leo looked at the two young men, at the genuine shame in their eyes. He placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. Your character isn't defined by the mistake you make, Leo said, his voice kind. It's defined by how you choose to face it. You're facing it now. You'll be fine sailors. Chris then took a step forward. Commander, we'd like to do something to show our respect. If you'll allow it. We want to start a new tradition here. We're calling it the Phantom Guard. Every day, a different service member will care for this aircraft. In your honor, and in honor of everyone who served before us. Leo stood silently for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the young, earnest faces before him. Then, a genuine, warm smile broke across his face, lighting up his tired eyes. "I accept." 6 months later, a bronze plaque was installed beside the F-4, telling the story of Commander Leo, the Ghost, Vance. But the real memorial wasn't the medal. It was the living tradition. Every morning, a different sailor arrived to polish the Phantom. Leo still came every day, but he no longer worked alone. Young aviators and technicians would join him, not to help, but to listen. He'd tell them stories about flying, about leadership, and about serving something greater than yourself. One afternoon, a young female pilot, one of the Navy's best, was helping him wipe down the canopy. She pointed to a tiny, barely visible dent near the cockpit. "What's that from, Commander?" Leo smiled. "A souvenir," he said softly. "From an old friend over Quang Tri province." As he spoke, the afternoon sun caught the side of the fuselage just right, illuminating a line of small, stenciled letters, almost completely faded by time and salt, right below the canopy rail. The past isn't just something to be remembered in statues or ceremonies. It's a living thing, a legacy that must be tended to, cared for, and passed on. And on a breezy coast in California, a humble hero and a new generation learned that essential truth together. If this story moved you, let us know what you think in the comments below. We all have heroes in our communities, often hidden in plain sight. We'd love to hear your stories, but please, always comment with respect. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories.